In this video, we will learn some interesting facts about the Parliament of India is the supreme legislative body of the Republic of India. That means it has the authority to make laws in India. Now, the Parliament of India is a bicameral parliament, meaning it is divided into two houses. Bicameral means two, lower house and upper house. Now, lower house is the Lok Sabha, which is also known as the House of the People, and upper house is the Rajya Sabha, which is also known as the Council of States. And in this video, we are going to talk about Lok Sabha. So first thing first, why is it called the Lok Sabha? Because it is the House of the People, meaning the members of the Lok Sabha are directly elected by the people of India. Every 5 years, you and I go for voting, right? There we have the option of electing two candidates. One is an MLA, who goes on to become a member of your state legislative assembly, and the other one is an MP, who goes on to become a member of Lok Sabha. And since we, the citizens of India, have elected the Lok Sabha member through direct voting, in theory, he or she represents the common voice and will of the people of India. And that is how Lok Sabha gets the name House of the People. The maximum strength of Lok Sabha allotted by the Constitution of India is 552. But as of now, it has 545 seats, in which 543 members are elected through direct voting, and the remaining 2 members are from the Anglo-Indian community, nominated by the President of India. Every Lok Sabha member has a term limit of 5 years. That means every session of Lok Sabha operates for 5 years because election for the Lok Sabha and every state legislative assembly have to take place every 5 years, unless called earlier. Now let's get to know a little more about these members of Lok Sabha. How are they elected? As I've said earlier, the members of Lok Sabha are directly elected by the people of India on the basis of universal suffrage. Universal suffrage is a concept where everyone who is above 18 years old has the right to vote in a political election. In India, general elections are held in every 5 years, and the purpose behind the general election is to choose an MP and an MLA. MP stands for Member of Parliament. After getting elected, he or she will go on to become a member of Lok Sabha, and an MLA stands for Member of State Legislative Assembly. He or she, after getting elected, will go on to become a member of State Legislative Assemblies. Now, how do you choose an MP for Lok Sabha? For choosing a Member of Parliament to Lok Sabha, each state is divided into constituencies. Every state is allotted a certain number of Lok Sabha seats. Apart from the states, even the 7 union territories get a Lok Sabha seat. After allotting Lok Sabha seats to each and every state, each state is then divided into constituencies in such a manner that the ratio between the population of each constituency and the number of seats allotted has to remain the same throughout the state. For the purpose of calculating the votes, the population is taken as per 1971 census. As of now, Lok Sabha has 545 seats, but out of that 543 are elected by direct voting. That means there has to be 543 parliamentary constituencies in India, each electing one member. Now, in order to form a government, any political party needs to get a simple majority. So how do you get that? India follows the British style of voting called the first past the post system. It is a very simple voting method where every citizen gets to cast one vote and the candidate with most number of votes wins. This method of voting is called first past the post. In other words, winner take all. At first, when you look at it, you may find it very simple, logical and fair, but then it's not. Personally, I'm not a big fan of it. It's terrible. It does not represent true democracy. It has too many flaws, and let me tell you what they are. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take examples of real political parties that exist in India and show you the entire problem behind this first past the post voting system. For example's sake, we are going to take 7 different political parties that will contest for 100 Lok Sabha seats. Now, I've taken 100 seats because it is just an example, although the real number is 545, but we are taking 100 as a simple example. So these political parties are BJP, Congress, Telugu Desam Party, then Shiv Sena, Janata Dal, Kerala Congress and Revolutionary Socialist Party. All these 7 political parties have put their best candidate forward who will go on to become MPs in Lok Sabha. And the rule of the game is the party with maximum number of Lok Sabha seats will get to form the government. Now you and I as citizens of India, we will go to the polling station all across the country and cast our vote for our favorite candidate. Here we will assume 100% voter turnout. The results of the election are as followed. BJP gets 20 Lok Sabha seats, Congress gets 19, Telugu Desam Party gets 15, Shiv Sena gets 13, Janata Dal gets 6, Kerala Congress gets 18 and Revolutionary Socialist Party gets 9 Lok Sabha seats. Now, as per first past the post voting system, The party which has the higher percentage of Lok Sabha seats will get to form the government, right? In that case, clearly BJP wins. They get to rule and form the government. Now here's the problem with this kind of voting system. The majority of the Indian population do not want BJP as their preference, they wanted someone else. However, BJP won. Similarly, if there were more than 7 political parties, then the winning party's percentage would have been even less and there would still be a winner. This particular problem is called minority rule. Now the second problem with this kind of voting system is that it leads to two-party system, wherein the two major political parties dominate the government. Let's see how that happens. So these were the results of the election. Let's say the Revolutionary Socialist Party decides to back the political party which has the second best chance of winning, which is the Congress Party. The reason could be simple. Maybe they worked out something together. It's in the best interest of RSP to merge with Congress and form the government. Now try to understand this. Many voters voted for RSP because of their ideologies, but RSP decided to merge with Congress. Now Congress has in total 28 seats out of 100 Lok Sabha seats, which can easily give them a majority to form a government. However, it is not that simple. BJP, which is now in second place, will approach other political parties to merge with them. Let's say they approached TDP to merge with them. TDP has 15 Lok Sabha seats. Now BJP has 20 plus 15, that is 35 Lok Sabha seats. Now the overall new result looks like this. BJP has the majority and can easily form the government. You see, from 7 political parties, now the competition is down to 5. Apart from the parties that are in first and second position, the remaining 3 political parties then start to decide who they want to merge with. Again, there can be many reasons behind it. Maybe the cost of running an election is getting way too high for them. Or maybe they can sense that their loyal voters are no longer relating to their ideologies, which can then eradicate their existence. So the remaining 3 political parties decide to merge with the top 2 political parties which are leading. Now the new result looks like this. BJP has 54 Lok Sabha seats out of 100 and Congress has 46 Lok Sabha seats out of 100. Clearly BJP is the winner since they have acquired the majority, so they will go on to form the government. Now this is called two-party system. As time goes by, in every election, either one of them will form the government. You see, this does not look fair in any sense, and it will never allow new political parties with new ideologies to take the charge. And if you see, initially BJP and Congress together had 39% vote. That means 61% of the voters wanted someone else as their first choice to form the government. This is what makes first past the post voting system not good for modern democracy. So far we have seen how the MPs are elected and how a political party acquires simple majority in Lok Sabha to form the government. Now it's time to choose the Prime Minister, who becomes the head of the government. Always remember this point. The Prime Minister is elected by the members of Lok Sabha among themselves. That means all the MPs in Lok Sabha have to vote to choose a Prime Minister among themselves, which further means the Prime Minister needs to be an MP of Lok Sabha. The MP that gets more than 50% support, we know that Lok Sabha has 545 seats, so more than 50% of 545 is 273. That means if a Lok Sabha member gets the approval of at least 273 MPs, then he or she becomes the Prime Minister of the nation. Of course, the political party that has the majority of Lok Sabha seats forms the government, so naturally they get to choose the Prime Minister because they have the simple majority. And their MP will choose their own party member who will then head the government as Prime Minister. So now that the Prime Minister has been elected, it's time to see how other ministers make it to the Union Cabinet, who will assist the Prime Minister in doing business for the nation. As we have seen moments back that members of Lok Sabha are the elected representatives. That means they are elected directly by the people. And these 545 members of Lok Sabha then elects a Prime Minister who will go on to become the head of the government. Now Prime Minister, being the head of the government, cannot run the show alone. He needs the help of other ministers who will assist him in running the government. So basically these ministers who will assist the Prime Minister in running the government are collectively called as Union Council of Ministers. So naturally Prime Minister is also the head of the Union Council of Ministers. There's another term given to them. They are also called as Cabinet Ministers. These Cabinet Ministers are an executive body that takes the supreme decision for the nation. They are individually assigned various ministries like Finance, Education, Defense, Railway, Home Affairs, External Affairs, etc. So these are the list of Union government ministries. Just have a look at it. All these ministries have their respective ministers who are responsible for its smooth functioning, and they pretty much command the ministry. And they all report to the Prime Minister. The Union Council of Ministers consists of three categories of ministers: the Cabinet Minister, then we have the Minister of State, and then we have the Minister of State with independent charge. I'll quickly tell you the difference between these three. A Cabinet Minister is the head of a particular ministry, then Minister of State works under a Cabinet Minister. That means he or she is a junior minister who reports to the Cabinet Minister. Then a Minister of State with independent charge is a minister who is given independent charge of a ministry, which don't have a Cabinet Minister to oversee the operations. That's how the independent word comes from. Now I want you to understand this carefully. The power of the Minister of State is confined to a particular region. The Union Cabinet Minister comes into the picture when a bigger policy decision needs to be taken. And moreover, the Prime Minister may not always call all the state ministers to discuss issues. He or she may simply discuss it with their cabinet ministers. So together all these ministers are called Union Council of Ministers. They help the Prime Minister in running the government and conduct business for the nation. Now all these Council of Ministers have to be a member of Parliament, but they need not be only a member of Lok Sabha. They can also be a member of Rajya Sabha. Now think about it. If the Council of Ministers can be from both the houses, then obviously these ministers are chosen by the political party that dominates the Lok Sabha. And we have seen how multiple political parties form coalition and dominates Lok Sabha and then forms the government. But then you know that there will be one political party which has the maximum number of Lok Sabha seats. That party becomes the dominating political party, and they take most of the decisions as to which member gets what ministry. So it's like you support me and I shall give you something good in return. And that's how multiple political parties cooperate and forms a coalition government. So anyways, these Council of Ministers are appointed by the political party that dominates the Lok Sabha. And I think I don't need to tell you this, that the Prime Minister, who is the head of the Council of Ministers, he or she also belongs to the political party that dominates Lok Sabha. Hence, in a very formal definition, the Council of Ministers are chosen by the Prime Minister. But in reality, the party decides. Once they are chosen by the Prime Minister, these Council of Ministers are appointed by the President. So always remember this, it is the President who ultimately appoints them. Don't forget that. I hope you understood the entire system. Alright, so far we have seen how the members of Lok Sabha are elected, then how the political parties go into a coalition and form the government. Then we have also seen how the Prime Minister is elected and how the Council of Ministers are selected to run the government. Now we will see how the Speaker and Deputy Speaker of Lok Sabha are elected. Both the Speaker and Deputy Speaker have to be a member of Lok Sabha, and they are elected by the members of Lok Sabha by simple majority. Simple majority refers to more than 50% of the members of Lok Sabha. So Lok Sabha has 545 members, and simple majority means 273 members. That means to become the Speaker and Deputy Speaker of Lok Sabha, you need an approval of at least 273 Lok Sabha MPs. Again, it is very obvious that the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker can easily come from the political party that has the majority of seats in Lok Sabha. And if you see, that is what happens in the case of Lok Sabha Speaker. Usually, the Lok Sabha Speaker belongs to the political party that has the majority of seats in Lok Sabha. However, a Deputy Speaker is unanimously elected by the House, and he or she could be either from the ruling or the opposition party. Sometimes the ruling government chooses a Deputy Speaker from a party which has the third highest number of Lok Sabha members. You see, a party with second highest Lok Sabha members will be a direct opposition of the ruling government. But then the party which has the third highest Lok Sabha seats is not a direct opposition. And I think you can easily figure out that in politics, it's all about looking for opportunities by doing a favor in hope of forming a larger coalition in future elections. Because if you see, the Speaker of Lok Sabha will usually be a member of the political party that dominates Lok Sabha. He or she is often blamed for being partial towards his or her own political party. Ultimately, the function of the Lok Sabha Speaker and the Deputy Speaker is to maintain discipline and decorum in the House. And they also have the power to punish a member for their unruly behavior by suspending them. They also have the power to move various kinds of motions and resolutions. I'll tell you about these motions and resolutions in a moment. As of now, just know that the Lok Sabha Speaker gives permission of moving various kinds of motions and resolutions. So you see, with these powers and functions, any ruling government would love to have a Speaker or a Deputy Speaker from their own political party. Now we will get to know about what are the rules of procedure in Lok Sabha and how Lok Sabha conducts business. First thing first, all the proceedings of Lok Sabha is issued by the Speaker from time to time. The Speaker collects all the items of business and notices from ministers, private members, and then the Speaker includes them in the daily list of business, which is printed and circulated to members in advance. And that's how all the proceedings in Lok Sabha begins. Now, there are 3 sessions of Lok Sabha that takes place in a year. They are budget session, which takes place from February to May, then monsoon session, which is from July to September, and the last one is winter session, which is from November to mid-December. Let me show it to you on a timeline as to what a day looks like in the Parliament of India. Lok Sabha holds its sittings usually from 11 am to 1 pm and from 2 pm to 6 pm. And it also extends beyond 6 pm depending on the business requirements. Now we will get to know about question hour. Question hour is the first hour of every sitting in Lok Sabha in between 11 am to 12 pm. By the word question, you can easily figure out that during question hour, any member of the House can ask questions to the respective ministers on different aspects of administration and government policies. Basically, during this time, the members can hold the government accountable for its action by asking questions, and the respective ministers are answerable for the ministry's actions. Now, there are 3 different types of questions: starred, unstarred, and short notice questions. Let's quickly get to know each one of them. The first one is start question. A start question is asked by an MP and answered orally by the minister in charge. MPs are allowed to ask one start question each in one sitting. The questioning MP can thereafter ask up to 2 follow-up questions. Start questions are submitted in advance, that is 15 days before, and only 15 questions are picked through ballet for oral answer on a day. The second one is unstart question. An unstart question is not asked orally and it only receives a written reply from the ministry. There are no follow-up questions asked. They are submitted 15 days in advance. A maximum of 160 unstart questions are picked for a day. And the third one is short notice question. Now these are related to matters on urgent public importance. They can be answered only on short notice if permitted by the Speaker, and the minister concerned is prepared to answer it at short notice. A short notice question is taken up for answer immediately after the question hour. Now let's see what is 0 hour. The time immediately following the question hour is known as 0 hour. It starts at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and that is how the name 0 hour comes. And the members can, with prior notice to the Speaker, raise issues of importance during this time. The 0 hour is usually used to raise matters that are urgent and cannot wait for the notice period required under the procedures. After the question hour, the Lok Sabha begins its main work. It is also called as legislative business. During this time, the House typically hold discussions on important bills, then they talk about financial business related to budget, then the House also considers motions and resolutions and many other issues of national importance. All of this takes place from 2 pm onwards. Now let's briefly get to know about these legislative business, financial business, and then motions and resolutions. Let's get to know about legislative business first. Legislative proposals in the form of a bill can be brought forward either by a minister or by a private member. If it is by a minister, then naturally he or she will represent the government. In that case, it is known as government bill. And if a member who does not represent the government proposes a bill, then it is known as a private member's bill. Every bill passes through 3 stages. They are also called 3 readings before it is passed. To make a bill into a law, it must be passed by both the houses of the parliament, which is the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. And then it is sent to the president for the final approval. Let's look at the financial business of Lok Sabha. When we say financial business, the House has to do presentation, discussion and conduct voting on the annual budget and railway budget. And then the members of Lok Sabha collectively pass something called the appropriation bill, which is basically a law that authorizes the expenditure of a government funds. In other words, every member in Lok Sabha discusses, then they vote, and then they pass appropriation bill, which is like giving permission to the government for utilizing the national fund. Lok Sabha also takes care of the finance bill. Now these are bills related to financial matters. Now all of this has a long drawn out process and it takes up a major part of the Lok Sabha's time. Now let's look at the motions and resolutions. Any decision by the Parliament, be it on a legislation proposal or a policy, is taken after due consideration and voting. The House members can express their opinions or seek the attention of the government on matters of public importance. This is where resolutions and motions come into the picture. So basically, the Parliament consists of legislature and executive. The legislature discusses bills, laws, they give suggestions, they criticize, they debate, as well as question the government. The executive branch consists of the President, the Prime Minister, Council of Ministers, and other officers. So basically, the role of the executive is to pass and implement the law, policies, and schemes. Now, with the help of resolutions and motions, it gives power to the legislature to exercise legislative control over the executive. Now, this way, there are checks and balances in the Parliament, which is the essence of a parliamentary form of government. Resolutions and motions can be brought forward by government or by private members. Let me tell you again who are private members. Actually, there is no such thing as private members in Lok Sabha. The actual phrase is called Private Members Bill. If you see, most of the bills in the Parliament is introduced by the government. And we know government is formed by the political party that has simple majority in Lok Sabha. Now, there are members who do not represent the government. They belong to the opposition party. So if a bill is introduced by an MP who is not representing the government, then that bill is called as Private Members Bill. So in a nutshell, a member of Lok Sabha has the power to move a resolution and motion in front of the House. These are motion of no confidence, motion of adjournment, motion of censure. And always remember, while an MP has the power to move a resolution and motion, however, the Speaker of the House has to give the permission. And we have seen that Speaker of Lok Sabha, apart from being a member of the Parliament, he or she is also a member of the political party that dominates Lok Sabha. So it is very rare that the Speaker gives permission to a member for moving a resolution or motion against the government. In theory, this is a key power of an MP. He or she can bring the focus of the House and the government to a particular problem by moving resolutions and motions. So far we have learned about Lok Sabha sessions. Then we have also seen what a day looks like in Lok Sabha. We saw what is question hour, 0 hour, and then we also saw what are the main business of Lok Sabha. You see, there's so much of work when it goes to running a country. Since time is limited and there's a lot of work, this is where parliamentary committees come into the picture. Committees are formed to get the work done with special focus. Now, I have a separate video on parliamentary committee. I strongly recommend that you go and watch that video. I'll put the link in the description, so make sure that you watch it. In the next video, I'll explain how Lok Sabha is much more powerful than Rajya Sabha, because Lok Sabha has certain powers that make it more powerful than the Rajya Sabha. And I believe it requires a separate video because there are few things that I need to discuss in detail. This video has already crossed 20 minutes, so we will end this topic on Lok Sabha for sure in the next video. Alright then, I hope you found this video informative. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.